Okay. All right, well, we're going to get started. So, hi everyone, my name is Mandy Scoville. I am the undergraduate advisor and program coordinator in the Department of French and Italian. I just want to start off by saying on behalf of myself, on the behalf of the Department of French and Italian and La Maison Française, we're very excited that you are here and we welcome you for this informational session on TAPIF. So in case you are wondering, I think most of you saw the information about it, but TAPIF is the teaching assistant program in France. Did I get that right? I know a lot of you have some questions, and so that's why we are excited to have here with us today Shannon Reeder, who is going to be leading the session. I'll let Shannon give you some background about her and everything, but I just wanted you to know Shannon completed her undergrad in 2016. Mm-hmm. She did the TAPIF 2016, 2017, and then came back to Madison to do her master's in the professional French master's program and finished that in 2019 in the spring. Mm-hmm. So I am going to now pass it on to you, Shannon, and thank you.
Great, thanks, Mandy. Like Mandy said, I'm also a Wisconsin alumna, a two-time Wisconsin alumna, I guess. I did TAPIF immediately after graduating from undergrad in 2016, so for that school year. And then I did the PFMP, and I currently am in Chicago where I work for Business France. Business France is the French government's national trade and investment agency. So I work now currently to help North American companies within food and agribusiness to do investments in France. So still very implicated in the French government and in French speaking. Before I go into the presentation, I'll tell you a little bit about my experience with TAPIF or TAPIF. I was placed in a small town of 4,000 people in the Bordeaux region. I worked at a high school. I lived at the high school, which is really cool. And I taught basically 8th grade through senior year of high school students. And we did all sorts of things from vocabulary to lessons on whatever I wanted to talk about that week. Because I was there in 2016, we did a lot of election and political information on the US. I also did things about American colleges. I did a thing on March Madness. Wisconsin was doing well that year, but it was really cool. So we'll get into the details and I'll add little details about my experience when we get to those parts of the presentation. So I will share my screen and hope that it works. Not working yet. Let's see, it doesn't let me share, which might be my computer thing, which is strange. I can also send it to you, Mandy, if it doesn't.
Okay, sure. I'll see if I can get that. I show you as co-host. I'm not sure why that's.
I think it's my computer. I have a very old MacBook.
Okay.
So I will. But in the meantime, so TAPIF is a program through the French education system and the embassy. It's a global program. The American one is just called TAPIF, Teaching Assistant Program in France. But there's assistants from all over the world. I believe that there are 4,500 assistants yearly in France, with 1,500 coming from the US to teach English. There's also assistants from the UK, from India, teaching English as well. And I think there's over 60 countries represented and over 15 languages. So actually, I was in such a small area. We had assistants for Spanish, English, one German, even one Italian assistant, which was really cool. Just sending this to Mandy. And we'll get into this too, but the timeline is it's not a whole year, it's October through the end of April. So then almost entire French school you start before or after the school year starts and end before the school year ends. Okay. Okay, maybe I send it to you. But that didn't work. And not everyone goes to France either, which I think is something not everyone knows. I didn't realize this until I applied, but you can also apply to go to the Vacances d'Outre-mer, so like the Martinique and Guadeloupe, and not just to France, which is another option. We'll get into that too, but their pay is slightly higher there because the cost of living there is, interestingly enough, higher than in France. You also get placed in a high school or an elementary school. I happened to be placed in a high school, but I had friends that I met later, actually from PFMP, who taught in elementary school. It's a little bit different experience, but the same overall responsibilities and premises as the high school. Did you get the email, Mandy? Okay. Do we have any like initial questions before we launch into it?
I have a question. Can I just okay. Hi. One of my best friends is doing TAPIF right now for the second year. And she loves it, but she told me like there's not, I know everyone's experience is different, but like there isn't a lot of structure. Like she's had a lot of problems with like apartments and like banking and stuff. So I was just wondering like if in your experience, like was there someone that you could like get help for those things?
So it's like really individual. It really kind of depends on not only the academy, but like the direct school that you're in. I was lucky that my professeur référent like reached out to me in the summer after I was assigned to school, and I was offered a place to live in my school, which was very lucky. Otherwise, it is up to the individual to find somewhere to live. But there's like always a huge Facebook group like every year for the assistants, and of course, Erin, who's the head of the program, is like at everyone's disposal. And you also be connected with once you're there. There's a huge meeting for the whole department. There's academy, department, like school, the whole department, and you get to meet other assistants there. And it's an easy way to like one, get to know people and also ask questions or try and find somewhere to live. But yeah, I got lucky. But the banking thing is up to you. I lived with the Spanish assistant, and one of the Spanish teachers took us both to the bank across the street to help us set up a bank account. But I studied abroad prior to doing TAPIF, so I knew about the difficulties of doing those things in France. It's definitely an experience, that's for sure. Okay. So like, as I said, TAPIF is a part of the American part of a larger program d'assistance en France. And so it's not just Americans, as I was saying, and it's a partnership through the French Education Ministry and through the embassy too. No, the next one too, we went over that. This is a little graphic. That's like what I was saying. There's like over 60 countries represented in TAPIF, teaching 15 languages, which is really interesting that they have all this access to language learning. There's about 4,500 students, or rather assistants, who come to France every year, with most of them being in secondary school. But like I said, about a quarter of them are in primary school, which my friend Nancy did, and she had a great experience. The next slide. And like I said too, it's not the whole school year. So French school starts in September and usually goes through the first couple of weeks or even the end of June. But you come kind of a month after school starts and leave about a month before school starts. The school's already flowing, not jumping in right at the beginning of the year. And you're also, I think I arrived about a week before, and I stayed an extra couple of weeks after to travel. Next one. And the duties are really, really general. So you're an assistant, so you're never alone in a room with students or a full class. You're not replacing a teacher, you're assisting a teacher. So there was times where I was in front of the class. The whole class with the teacher just sitting down, presenting on a thing I wanted to present on, like I said, like colleges or March Madness or the election system in the US. But at other times I took a small group of students in a separate classroom to have like a little discussion section to go over what they're working on. We worked on their schoolwork, but also worked on any discussion topics that they kind of wanted to talk about or I like had prepared for the lesson. But it's only 12 hours per week. You're not a full-time teacher. And usually they'll work with you and your schedule. My second semester there, I think I only worked Monday through Thursday. And so I had my Fridays free. And a lot of schools try and work with you that way. They either have Monday or Friday free because they know a lot of people are traveling. I was only in one school, so I lived there and I worked there. But some people get placed in 2 or 3 schools. So you'd be dividing your time amongst those schools, and it's up to the schools themselves to work out how much time you spend in each one. So I did have a friend who did work in 3 different schools. Next slide. This is really kind of general too. You do have to, of course, speak French, but a lot of times they want you to only speak English with the students. A lot of people have the experience where the teachers tell the students you don't speak French, which that didn't work. They knew immediately that I spoke French. That didn't work. But we only spoke English with the students. And like I said, you're spending time as you want. Sometimes teachers tell you to prepare a certain subject, but you spend a little bit of time before class, the day before, preparing and working to be ready for class the next day. The next slide. Secondary school is very similar. You're really a resource. And I feel like I had a conversation group. Sometimes I just did a whole presentation in front of the class. It really depended on the teacher and the students' level of English and what we were learning about. I actually had a really cool experience where my school had what they called a European section, where it was a history class and like social studies taught in English. Since they didn't have English class, they had the social studies in English. So I got to talk with them about more complex topics. We went really much more in depth about American politics and like European affairs. So it was really fun to have like that high level of a conversation with students and to kind of hear their thinking on the American election and the upcoming French election, because that was the year after. And then the next one. And like I said, there's multiple academies. As you know, like there's regions in France. And so you get to pick 3 regions to rank. You can rank just 1, you can rank just 2, but they come from different size. There's like small, medium, large academies. You pick 1 from each size. I don't remember which 3 I ranked, but I do know I ranked Bordeaux first, and that's where I was placed. But I did rank that I wanted to be in a medium-sized city, thinking I'd end up in the city of Bordeaux, and I was placed in a 4,000 person, really a village. It was very small. So you're not guaranteed to get what you ranked. You might not even get an academy you ranked, but it doesn't really matter where you are. But once you accept TAPIF, you will receive a few months later you'll receive your academy placement with your acceptance letter, and then later in the summer you'll receive your specific school placement. And then next, so you are paid, which is great. It's about 790 euros per month. That's after taxes and everything. That's more than what I was earning. You also get, a couple of slides later, you also will be enrolled in the French healthcare system, the Sécurité Sociale, which is wonderful. You have access to that system. You don't have to rely on the American system or pay for private health insurance. And like I said, my rent was very low at the school, but there's also options to get reduced rent and to apply for certain French governmental aids if your rent is higher than what you're earning or higher than you want to spend. And like I said before, there's a little bit of a higher pay for the dom-tom countries. So you'll be enrolled, you enroll yourself in the French health system. There's a guide how to do it. You'll get help. It does take some time, but it is a really, really cool benefit of TAPIF, and you're in the system for life. if you return to France and you need health insurance. Next, this obviously didn't affect me 5 years ago, but with COVID, I think a lot has changed. There were assistants there this year, but there's always up-to-date information on the official French embassy site. There's also a website that I use for work called Welcome to France, which you can always check to see new COVID regulations and what Americans need to do to enter the country. But if you check the embassy website, you can see what the rules are within France currently. And then next, and like Samantha had asked, there are some things you have to do on your own and some personal expenses. So housing you do have to pay for, whether that's already by the school, which you can accept or decline, that is up to you to pay for. And also full expenses. I don't know if you know this, I didn't know this until I got to France, but secondary and elementary schools are off every 6 weeks. They have a 2-week break. So every 6 weeks, you also have a 2-week break, which a lot of people use to travel. That's obviously up to you to pay for. And then any medical costs outside of what the French system covers, which is most things. But otherwise, things are covered. And then for applying, the big question. You do have to be a US citizen. There is an age limit, so 20 to 35 years old. Most people, I think, are university graduates. And then having that proficiency in French is really, really important. I'm not sure if it's still the same, but I had to have somebody fill out to certify that I had that level of French. Just a professor at Wisconsin to say that I had that level of French. And next. Yeah, and so I think those criteria is pretty rigorous. They do get a lot of applicants. However, as Britt said in his email, Wisconsin does very well in being placed for TAPIF because of the strong French program we have. Teaching experience does help. And we just tutor, whether it's in French or English, and that's a good thing to have. And then, of course, being interested in intercultural environment and in working abroad. Next one. There's a huge network of alumni. I didn't realize there were that many TAPIF alumni until I was reading this over. I'm in that LinkedIn group. It's really helpful. People post jobs, people post updates. It's a really nice resource. There's also access to scholarships, which is on the next slide with a few options. So even the PFMP, which I did here at Wisconsin, there are alumni scholarships for that, which I did receive. Since I did TAPIF, I mean, I finished over 4 years ago. Every year, there's more and more programs giving scholarships to alumni of the program, especially Middlebury and Wisconsin are like some of the big ones that I've seen. And then next. There's also scholarships at French schools as well. Doing a master's in France is a little bit different, but it is also really beneficial because you can stay in France after. And you can apply, seeing the deadline January 15th on the TAPIF website, you can apply to, if I remember correctly, it's a few forms you fill out on there. And then, like I said, you apply in January, you'll hear back in like February, March. They do waitlist people, and then it's also possible to get in later in the summer. And then in the summer, you'd find out exactly which school you're placed at. Of course, you can follow TAPIF on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It could be really useful actually to follow them for any updates on application deadlines. They have moved the deadline in the past to give people more time. That's good information to have that they'll post online. And then, like I said, Erin is the main contact. She's somebody you can reach out to with any questions. You can also reach out to me in the meantime while you're applying. But once you're in France, Erin's your point of contact, and she's based in Washington, D.C. These aren't my pictures, but they're good ones submitted. Go to the next slide. I don't think there's any. Yep. And then if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them about my experience or about applying or anything else.
I was curious, how many people typically get accepted? Like, is it really difficult if you don't have any teaching background?
I think honestly that it's pretty, I don't want to say subjective. I think a lot of things factor in. You have to have a teaching background. I'd only tutored through the university. It's not like I had an extensive teaching background. The level of French is really important. You do write a couple of like mission statements, I think, in French, and maybe something in English. So just explaining why you want to do it, I think, is the most important part. Other questions?
Your experience, like, were there any additional opportunities for like work outside of TAPIF, or like did that not like work with your visa? I know it's only 12 hours a week and a lot of people do travel and do other things, but like
Yeah.
what did you do with your time outside of that? Were there other opportunities for work?
If you're on a very specific type of visa, it's for teaching assistants. Actually, there's a part of it's covered. You don't have to pay for the full visa price. So you can't get another real job. However, under the table work, a lot of people do that. You can tutor your students and charge them. My town was so small, I didn't even look into doing that. A lot of people do tutoring. I mean, I'm sure there's people who have like been servers under the table too. But like I said, I know it sounds like not a lot of money, 790 euros a month, but I paid 128 euros or something like that in rent. I had a lot of disposable income to spend on travel and food and everything. I never felt like it wasn't enough. And my friends who paid higher rent to live in a slightly bigger city, you can apply. It's called, I'm going to say what it's called, but there's a French program that's for rent assistance. And you can apply, and it kind of makes an algorithm based on what you earn and what your rent is, and it reimburses you. And it takes months for it to go through because it is, once again, the French government. But it's retroactive. So if you applied in October and they approved it in January, you get retroactive your rent adjustment back. Other questions?
So I think you kind of started to mention this or said something about it along the lines, but you do have to have like a background in education, like kind of a formal background, or can you talk about that?
So I went straight out of undergrad, so I never had like a teaching experience beyond just tutoring. So it's not going to be a formal education background because you are just an assistant. Like I said, you're not replacing a teacher, you're just assisting a teacher, and you're an extra, not even extra, but you're like an extra input because you have the direct experience of being an American. That's what they want to learn about is American culture, American life, and hearing from a real English speaker is really what you're there for. So you don't have to have any curriculum planning background or anything like that. Other questions? I would say too, I think people ask me a lot about my experience and what I got from it and what was the most important thing. I think the most important thing once you're accepted and once you're in the program is to be really open-minded. That really defines your experience. Every academy is different, every school is different, everyone's experience is different, and it's really based on how you go into it. I did not want to be in a town that's small, and at first I was really worried about it, but I had like a wonderful, wonderful experience because of the people that I met there within my department. I had a train station, thankfully, in my town. I go to Bordeaux really easily. The other assistants lived in a town 2 stops over, about 10 minutes away. There's about 30 of us, or maybe 20, and most of them were in that slightly bigger city. I saw them all the time. We got to hang out, and it's a really good community to have of English and French speaker, English, Spanish speakers, and 1 Italian speaker and 1 German speaker. So it's a really fun to have that community. It is only 12 hours per week, so you really have a lot of free time, and it's up to you how you approach it. People do have their stories about the schools being unorganized or showing up to school, but it's really up to you to be proactive and talk to the teachers and get your schedule sorted out with them.
Yeah, that was my other question was like, I know it is the French system and they're not always the best at communicating. But like I have heard a lot of times people like go to school and like nobody's there, like the teachers don't give them a schedule.
Yeah.
So I just don't know how you would like avoid that.
It's really, you can't expect that's going to happen to you. That never happened to me. It did happen to my friends. It's kind of just like going with the flow. So like, sure, you wasted your time going to school that morning, but it's really on the teachers and not you. You don't lose money and you don't lose anything. It is frustrating, but it's really on them. And you can always talk to them about it. Like, hey, I want a set schedule. I was proposed, like, do whatever you want, have a free schedule. And I said, no, like, please give me a schedule. That way, teacher always knew when I was coming and we could plan together.
And then my other question was, I know you said there's a Facebook group, but like, how did you like meet the other, like you were saying your friends, the other assistants? Were those people that you knew before, or like, was it from the Facebook?
No. So when I got to school, so I lived there, it was just me and the Spanish assistant who also was teaching there. And then we had a huge department meeting. So like there's the academy and the department. The department had like 30 assistants. There was a meeting for all of us at the very beginning before we even went to school, I think. For us to all meet, they present to us about health insurance and supplemental insurance that you could pay for. And I was able to meet them there. And then we created like a group chat. But once you're in, like accepted, someone will create like a TAPIF 2022, 2023 group. And then some people would be proactive to create like academy of whatever. You meet people that way too and talk about rooming together or where you're placed. Because there are a lot of really small schools around in the academies. People are alone, so.
Okay, thanks.
No, it's a lot. I mean, it's interesting. One of my friends from TAPIF I hadn't seen since, but I talked to her and I just saw her a month ago when I was in Paris for work. So you really do get to meet a lot of really interesting people. I think that's one of the big selling points too.
Have you heard anything or like, do you know anything about like working in any of like the Département d'Outre-mer? Or like, are those like, is the system really different? Is it really similar? Is it more difficult to get in over there or?
I think most people apply to go to France. I think less people go to the Outre-mer, and you could get placed there without having ranked it. I think it is different. Obviously, it's a different culture, it's a different environment, different school system. I don't have any experience with it, but they do pay you more because cost of living is different. But I think it's a little bit more, I don't want to say not difficult to get in, but it's a very different living situation than living in France. I think sometimes people have to have cars and there's a lot of things going on, but I know someone, or I met someone who did it and she loved it. So once again, it just like kind of depends on the experience. That's not super helpful, but.
Are there any more questions?
I don't know. Mandy, is there anything you had questions or things we didn't go over, do you think?
I was just thinking, I wish we could raise the age limit so I can do it, because I did study abroad and I did work abroad. I did a bunch of things, but I never did TAPIF, but that's okay. I'm excited that
I think
there.
It's fun, yeah. I think they put, they had it on the little infographic. The average age is 23. A lot of people do it right out of undergrad. It's like a gap year thing, which is precisely what I did. But there's students in my group who are older, who are almost 30, already had masters, who already worked. So just wanted to not take a break, but do something else for a year. So it's not just undergraduate or people who just graduated.
Well, here's a question for you. After you do your application and acceptance and everything, if you get accepted and everything, is there like a period between then and when you leave where there's some prep work, or do you have advice for people on what to do before they go? like at that period of time?
I think so. I heard from my teacher in like June, and luckily he was really responsive. He emailed me, introduced himself, and kind of we communicated a little bit throughout the summer of anything I needed to prepare or bring. And then when it's getting closer, like where to meet him and everything. But I think in the beginning, it wasn't as much prep to do because you don't know whose classroom you're going to be in. I think I prepared like an about me PowerPoint, which is kind of funny to prepare, because I had that for the first day, so in case I had to present something. But it kind of depends on your professional, like that's what they call like a partner teacher who's like in charge of you. They could email you with things to prepare, things to do, but they will be in touch with you. It's not like you're just showing up to the school on October 1st with no idea what's going on. They could brainstorm ideas what you wanted to teach about. I may have done that too.
So I know you also gave Erin's contact information, which I'm not sure if everyone in here was able to copy that down. And if any of you need any of that information, I think you all, I hope, know how to reach me, and I'm happy to send you that. I'll put my email in the chat. But I know you mentioned something about you being available, Shannon. I didn't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, I can be available. I can put my email in the chat too. And then I think the website on there, and it's just TAPIF.org, and you can find information there, and Erin's contact information is there. And that would have all the resources. I have more documents. I has like any other more in-depth questions. TAPIF sent me a whole folder full of information. I have like an FAQ thing. If anyone has any further questions that I can send to.
I was just wondering, like, by the time you were accepted, and then like one, how long did it take to get your placement? And then two, like, when you went to France, did you already have a place to live, or did you like, because my friend like literally showed up to France and she like didn't have anywhere to live because she said it was easier to like find a place once you're already there. But that sounds kind of stressful.
Yeah, that is true. So my teacher offered me in June, when he introduced himself to me, like offered me a place to stay at the school then. So I was really lucky, like in that situation. When I did my internship for the PFMP in Paris, I did just show up to France without somewhere to live, and that is unfortunately the easiest way to do it, because there are a lot of like scams if you look up apartments on the internet and not seeing things in person. So then for my internship, I rented an Airbnb for a week and just looked around. If you're not in Paris, like it's really much easier to find a place to live. It is hard to find a place to live in Paris generally. And I will say too, I probably didn't mention this, but the cost of living in Paris is obviously higher than the rest of France. So if you want to be placed in Paris, it's something you really have to consider, that cost of living is higher, and it is hard to find a place to stay. Something to consider when ranking Paris.
Would you mind going
the timeline? Like you get accepted in February or March, and then in like June-ish you get the school assignment. But when you get accepted, it says you've been accepted into the Academy of Bordeaux, Grenoble, Lyon, whichever one.
Would you say that most, I'm sorry.
You can go ahead.
Would you say that most people are accepted, or is it really difficult and competitive to get in?
I think it's gotten more competitive over time. I think Taylor, when she did it, because Taylor is 5 or 6 years older than me, so did it 5 or 6 years before me. It was much easier to get in because people didn't know about it as well. But now that it's better marketed and they have people like me doing these presentations, I think it has gotten more difficult. I don't know how many people apply, but it's not nearly as competitive as getting into like a Fulbright program, because Fulbright is a similar program in France and other places in the world. It's not quite as competitive as that. And like I said to you, I think Wisconsin has a really good track record with having assistants placed in France because how strong the French department is, and how like honestly well known and renowned the Wisconsin French program is. did not have any stats on acceptance rate. And there is a wait list. So some people get in and don't go. So just like getting into the university, there is a wait list. My friend who I was talking about that I saw in Paris last month, she got in off a wait list. So she didn't have as much French experience as a lot of other assistants had. And she got accepted off wait list in, I think, July. So it could happen later in the summer too.
Could you go into like what you mean when you said that you stayed at the school? Like what did it all consist of? And
so my school was like an old historic chateau, like that was the building. And so because the school was in such a small town, those people who went to my school didn't actually live in that small town. They commuted in from other small towns in the area. So there's like a special, I think it's because there's a special baccalaureate program there for students who wanted to be like nurses. And so it was like a special thing people came there for, and for that European section thing. So there was like a boarding portion of the school where the students lived. Did not live there. There was like a building attached to the school that had 3 levels because the headmistress lived at the school as well. And so she had the apartment on the top floor. I forget who was on the second floor. It was like the school accountant or something, and his family, like he had children. And then the assistant from Argentina, Santiago, and I lived on the bottom floor, like a 2-bedroom apartment thing. It was great. It was like, I mean, I wouldn't choose to live in a town that small normally, but it was a really, really good deal. Don't have to worry about finding an apartment when I got there. The rent was so low that I didn't have to apply. It's called CAF there right now, the assistance program. And it was well worth it to live there. But yeah, it was an apartment, like a kitchen and like 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. And I just walked like 30 yards to school. I didn't walk very far at all. But other assistants lived, so my town, I said it was called Aiguillon, and it's 4,000 people. The biggest city in our department was called Agen. Agen has 30,000 people. And so a lot of the assistants who worked in Agen lived in Agen, or there's a couple other small town people who lived there too. And they just rented apartments in the city, either with each other or another friend who lived at her school too, or the school provided her options. There was also this really interesting, I forget what he called it. There was like an older man who had been a teacher previously, a German teacher. And so he rented out rooms in his house to assistants. We knew what it was like to be a teacher and to be an assistant. There's always options, and hopefully your school will put you in touch. Or like I said, if you stay in an Airbnb for a few days or a week, you'd have the time to find somewhere to live. It's a unique experience that I was, not unique, it happened to a lot of people, but I was lucky that I was offered a place to stay at the school and offered like so far in advance. I didn't have to worry about it.
Do we have any more questions for Shannon today? Well, if not, you guys also in the chat can find her email or mine. I mean, I'm happy to, help you as well. But if you have any other questions, you can contact one of us. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.